Good afternoon, members of the media, wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. I'd like to thank you all for coming to this media conference at such short notice today. But as a government, we thought it critical to address the ongoing onslaught of untruths, misrepresentation, and naked, blatant attempts to mislead the population of Trinidad and Tobago by a certain cabal of persons who are intent in behaving in the most unpatriotic manner possible. I have with me here this afternoon the Acting Attorney General, Sir Fitzgerald Hines, and the Minister of Works and Transport, Senator Raghunanan. So I'll start by addressing a most serious but false allegation and accusation made yesterday by a former Minister of Works and Transport, Mr. Devant Maharaj, who has obviously now taken up as a pastime and as a profession, spreading fake news, untruths, and misrepresentations to the public of Trinidad and Tobago. But what we had yesterday by Mr. Devant Maharaj was even more vile and unreasonable and unpatriotic behavior, in that he has told Trinidad and Tobago he is now intent on spreading his fake news and misrepresentations to other sovereign governments. And I am dealing in particular here today with the government's recent decision to purchase hostile and INCAT vessels, and in particular, 2 hostile Cape-class vessels, which are military naval vessels used by the Australian Border Patrol, as well as the Australian Navy. These are 58-meter Cape-class vessels. And I'd just like to use the opportunity, because apparently they want to say or make suggestions that there's something improper in the procurement of these vessels. Firstly, you all know that crime is a major issue for Trinidad and Tobago and for every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. And the use of illegal firearms, arms, and ammunition is the weapon of choice of perpetrators against citizens in Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago does not manufacture firearms. These firearms are coming in via our borders. The government, in its fight against crime, is providing the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard with 2 new hostile vessels. The procurement of these vessels started with the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, meeting with Mr. Turnbull, the Prime Minister of Australia, and his Foreign Secretary, in the presence of our Foreign and CARICOM Affairs Minister, Senator Dennis Moses, in April of this year at the CHOGM Leadership Conference in London. So in the full view of the international world, the Prime Minister and Mr. Turnbull met in the margins of the CHOGM conference along with their foreign ministers. At this stage, the Prime Minister expressed to the Prime Minister of Australia a desire for assistance, because Australia is known as one of the countries that produces some of the best marine vessels in the world. So he spoke to the Prime Minister of Australia and asked for assistance. The Prime Minister of Australia invited the Prime Minister to come to Australia, and he, meaning the Prime Minister of Australia, through his Foreign Minister, would set up meetings with Hostal and INCAT for Trinidad and Tobago to begin conversations for the possible purchase of these types of vessels. The Prime Minister of Australia also informed the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago that the timing was good, because Australian government had just taken a decision to have a military grant to other nations for the purchase of any military type equipment, which would include these Cape-class vessels, from Australia, a special military grant. So therefore, the government of Australia is the entity that first alerted the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago to these possibilities. Furthermore, Trinidad and Tobago currently has 6 hostile fast patrol vessels that were purchased and allowed to deteriorate between 2010 and 2015, but nevertheless, our Coast Guard has 6 fast patrol vessels which are built by Hostal. We also have 4 water taxis which are built by Hostal. The problems with these vessels are maintenance problems, and that they were not properly maintained and allowed to deteriorate. So I put that in the context of the suggestion that hostile vessels are not suitable. The Prime Minister, after his official visit to China, along with Minister Moses and myself, we then went to Australia on a working visit at the invitation of the Australian government. We did not invite ourselves, we didn't go there on a shopping spree. We were invited by the Prime Minister of Australia to go there on a working visit. And part of that visit was to look at the procurement of fast ferries, or 2 fast ferries in Trinidad and Tobago. The Express and the Spirit are INCAT vessels, so it made sense to go to INCAT. It also made sense to go to Austal for fast ferries, and also any other military or naval type vessels that they currently build. And this is exactly what we did. It was a very intense trip. Now, one of the reasons to go to these 2 leading international firms of shipbuilders is for the purpose of competition. And that is exactly what we did. We went, you all in Trinidad and Tobago were getting daily reports from the Office of the Prime Minister, inclusive of photographs and video, showing in a most transparent manner the persons and personnel that we were meeting with, where we were meeting, who we were meeting with, and what the discussions were. We reported on when we came back. Both Austal and INCAT are recognized as leading builders, and they have the best technology in the world for the building of fast ferries. Whilst we were there, we were allowed the opportunity to board and view one of these Cape-class vessels. And I'm going to really focus now on the Cape-class vessel, which is a naval vessel that is used in the Australian Border Patrol Fleet, and they are also used in the Australian Naval Fleet. We were able to board one, taken for a tour of one, etc. A price was then suggested, and we came up. INCAT does not make these types of vessels. Austal also has a shipbuilding facility in Alabama, in the United States, who their sole client, I believe the sole client, if not their major client, is the US Navy. So Austal builds vessels for the US Navy on US soil in Alabama, United States. Therefore, they are one of the best-in-class shipbuilders for naval vessels. We came back to Trinidad and Tobago. We invited both INCAT and Austal to provide their proposals to Trinidad and Tobago. A cabinet subcommittee was appointed. I was the chair of that committee along with some fellow ministers, and we asked some experts, the chairman of the port, 2 professors from the University of Trinidad and Tobago's Maritime Division, to sit on that panel with us. And we invited Austal and INCAT to come to Trinidad and Tobago. We announced it straight away. We actually, when they came and they met with the committee, we evaluated their proposals. And I can tell Trinidad and Tobago, immediately coming out of that first round of discussion, we saved Trinidad and Tobago over $10 million just in that initial conversation, because one of the vessel builders who was competing with the other one agreed to drop their price to the other vessel builder's price. This is the benefit of competition in a competitive procurement process that NIDCO will then undertake. With respect to these 2 naval vessels, it is completely false, inaccurate, and a downright lie by Mr. Devant Maharaj to suggest that experts were not used. Because I have with me here today, and we had spoke about this, on the 9th of July of this year, a report addressed to me as the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, Minister in the Office of the Attorney General, by the Chief of Defense Staff, Commodore Hayden Pritchard. We sent both Commodore Pritchard as well as an engineer from the Coast Guard immediately to Australia to go and see these Austal Cape-class vessels themselves and to produce a report for the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the people of Trinidad and Tobago as to whether these vessels are suited for the Coast Guard's purposes, and in particular, how they will integrate with the rest of the Coast Guard fleet. Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Devant Maharaj said, we should have used experts and the Coast Guard. They went, they spent a week there. The Australian government arranged for them to go out on a vessel. I believe it was with the Border Patrol. They went out on one of these Cape-class vessels. They went to the persons who use the Cape-class vessels, etc., and produced a report for us that said the vessels are suitable for Trinidad and Tobago's purposes. This is the Chief of Defense Staff and an engineer from the Coast Guard telling us, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, not only are the vessels suitable, they recommended that we purchase 2 immediately for their purposes in terms of shoring up our borders and ensuring our borders are less porous. Additionally, in this report, they said of their own volition that these vessels are actually integratable with the Daman vessels. The government of Trinidad and Tobago, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, own 6 hostile fast patrol vessels for the Coast Guard. These vessels have not been working. What is wrong with us asking hostile at their own expense? We did not pay a cent as Trinidad and Tobago to the hostile experts to fly their personnel down to Trinidad and Tobago. When we returned from Australia, they surveyed these 6 fast patrol vessels, and they've now put to us a proposal for making those vessels seaworthy once again, and we are going to do that so we can shore up our borders and ensure that our borders are less porous. This is what this government of Trinidad and Tobago is doing in order to fight crime. This is one of the initiatives. I have outlined very clearly the procurement process that has, as every moment you can go back and check, and you will all remember as members of the media that every step of the way this government told the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, through you, the media, exactly what was happening with the procurement of these 2 vessels, these Cape-class vessels that are recommended by our Coast Guard, and they are looking to utilize these vessels to ensure that our borders are less porous. That is a proper procurement system. We are now inviting hostile. A recommendation was made to Cabinet to go ahead with these purchases, and to what we've already outlined. The Prime Minister outlined the decisions when we visited the Coast Guard headquarters a couple of weeks ago. We are now asking hostile and INCAT to return to Trinidad and Tobago for a specialized team appointed by the government to enter into the negotiations to bring the prices of these vessels further down. It is also important and noteworthy that the financing for these vessels are coming from EFIC, which is the Australian government's arm, the equivalent of like an Exim Bank. They are the ones who are providing the financing, so they themselves must be satisfied that the shipbuilders are doing what is right, and there's complete propriety in what is taking place. If there was any concern by EFIC whatsoever, this transaction would not be going on. They have provided us with term sheets that we will negotiate. Trinidad and Tobago's purchase of the 6 hostile fast ferry vessels, as well as the 4 water taxis, was done through EFIC. When we were in Australia, we met with the leadership of EFIC, and they were happy to report that our credit rating is excellent, and that they would be pleased because we are about to complete paying for all of those vessels, the 6 fast patrol boats and the 4 water taxis, that we're about to complete our arrangements with EFIC, so they would now be prepared to extend arrangements for the purchase of 2 fast ferry vessels by Trinidad and Tobago, and we're going to tap into the Australian government's fund, and I believe it is through EFIC once again, for military vessels, and that is how we come up with the other 2 hostile. So the government of Australia, Trinidad and Tobago, are the ones who invited the government of Trinidad and Tobago to participate in discussions with their companies in Australia, in the full glare of the public, and at the highest possible levels. So for Mr. Devant Maharaj to tell the country in a most irresponsible manner that he has written to the Attorney General of Australia and the Leader of the Opposition of Australia and whoever else he has written to is a complete farce, and I am here today to label it unpatriotic behavior, because he's not playing the fool in our domain of Trinidad and Tobago. He is now trying frontally to scuttle this government's attempts to secure the borders of Trinidad and Tobago and to make Trinidad and Tobago a safe place. And I ask the population to note the type of behavior. I believe he represents the opposition. He holds himself out that way in what they're trying to do, and tie it back to their cancellation of the OPVs, which is what led to our borders being as porous as they are. The UNC government canceled the OPV contracts, did nothing about securing the borders of Trinidad and Tobago, And that is when the flooding of illegal arms and ammunition started coming in. And now that this government is doing all that it can, including arranging financing through the Australian government to deal with this, they are trying to scuttle it. Question why it is that the UNC, and in particular Mr. Maharaj, would not want a country to be a safer place and for us to take the fight to those who engage in criminal activity. And I will also ask this. I can say here that the purchase of the Daman vessels are currently under criminal investigation scrutiny. The purchase of the Daman vessels by the UNC is currently under criminal investigation scrutiny and not necessarily within the borders of Trinidad and Tobago. I will leave that right there for now. And then I will also ask this. They want to talk about procurement. It is passing strange that when the former Prime Minister, now leader of the opposition, went on a visit to China, she saw a vessel and said, I want one of those. And that is how we became saddled with the Chinese vessel that we now use as part of our fleet, that it has been suggested at times is not appropriate for the waters of Trinidad and Tobago. That is procurement UNC style when it comes to vessels. This government of Trinidad and Tobago is committed to the fight against crime and to providing our Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard with the best possible equipment to secure our borders. We will be proceeding to negotiate with Austal and the government of Australia, as well as EFIC, to secure these vessels in the shortest possible time. So I ask you all to ignore and to be a little more circumspect when dealing with these individuals who like to call these various press conferences, as they are entitled to do. Any citizen of Trinidad and Tobago is entitled to call a press conference and speak to the media. But today you have gotten the irrefutable facts. We have done everything, as we always do, in a very proper and transparent manner. That is what I will address at this time. I thank you all very much. I'll now pass over to Minister Sinanan.
Okay. Thank you, members of the media, colleagues. I will just like to address and to remind the population as to who we're dealing with. I would really have preferred to be outside, because we do have a lot of flash flooding throughout the country. Unfortunately, I have to be here to address some of the misinformation put out to the public yet again by a trio who I refer to as Dirty Harry, Lion Devant, and Conflicted Alfonso. I just want to remind you all as to the role played by Nyree Alfonso yet again in this press conference and the role played in the past. And I want to quote from the Joint Select Committee verbatim on that took place in the Parliament, where Ms. Alfonso admitted that through the chairman, questions asked by Senator Mark to Ms. Alfonso in response to Senator Mark's question, my role in the Port Authority was between the years 2011 to 2015. I provided certain legal advice and consultancy service to the authority with regards to the Superfast Galicia. During the course of this assignment, we had a situation where the Warrior Spirit, which is a previous cargo vessel to the Superfast Galicia, had significant mechanical difficulties. Ms. Alfonso again went on that having been said, I was summoned into a meeting of the Port Authority with management, with members of the board on December 30th, 2013, and remember the dates, and asked if I could assist in an emergency basis to locate a vessel. And I did so within 10 days or so period, which with the assistance of international brokers, I was able to find 6 vessels, which appeared to me, based on the information I got from Mr. Leon Grant, to meet the specifications of the cargo route. But my role was truncated at that point in the acquisition process because the Central Tenders Board, I am told, had no conversation with anybody from the Central Tenders Board, but I received information from the Port Secretariat and Mrs. Ford at the time. What this indicates, and she admitted, is that Ms. Alfonso went out single-handedly and got 6 vessels for the port. That process had to be scrapped because the Central Tenders Board came in and said, no, you cannot do that. But this is Ms. Alfonso who is coming to tell us about procurement at this point in time. Again, I just want to remind the media and the population about a conversation that Mr. Khan had put to Ms. Alfonso. And Ms. Alfonso at the Joint Select, her response, I do admit, and I said in a hurry, I think it is time to admit mea culpa. And our learned attorney will explain to you what the English for that phrase, for that Latin phrase is, what the English meaning for that is. In a hurry to divest myself of the responsibility of this tender, whether it came in mistake or whether by design, I cannot say. I do not think I used the right language. I do not think I used language that was precise enough. In other words, Ms. Alfonso admitted of certain undertakings in that process that she should not have been playing a role in. Evidence have come out in the public domain that Ms. Alfonso was someone who was hired by the port to give advice on how to get rid of the warrior spirit, went on to be a tenderer in the process, submitted a vessel to the port, won the tender, evaluated the process, charged the port for all her services. The end result is Ms. Nyree Alfonso was the agent for the vessel that won the tender. That matter is now before the Attorney General's office, and my colleague will address where that matter is at this point in time. The point I'm trying to make is that yesterday we had Dirty Harry lie in Devant and conflicted Nyree, bringing to the population information that they have no authority to speak on. And if we don't remind the population of who the messengers are, somewhere along the line, we might take for granted that what they are saying is the truth. And we will continue, every time they call a press conference and put lies in the public domain, we will respond to it. That is all I would say at this time, and I'll pass over to my colleague, Attorney General.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my cabinet colleagues, Minister Young and Minister Sinanan. I agree with both my colleagues that the last persons in this country who should be speaking anything to us about procurement has to be the likes of Nyree Alfonso and Devant Maharaj and the UNC, the past government in general. You just have to remember the whole issue around the procurement arrangements for the with Oasis Constructora for the extension of the highway to Point 14. The superfast Galatia, as you just heard my ministerial colleague elaborate upon, and of course, the one that is best known to us so far, the procurement of land by the HTC in the Eden Gardens affair. They are in no position to speak to us about anything that has to do with procurement. Just to follow up very briefly, after about 5 or 6 failed attempts to procure a vessel to replace the superfast Galatia, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, feeling the pain and the suffering and the loss that the people of Tobago had complained justifiably about, and recognizing its role to meet the demands of the sea bridge between Tobago and Trinidad, got a sub-cabinet team together which identified a vessel which was properly procured under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago by NIDCO, and this vessel is with us as we speak, the Galleon's Passage. I was astounded myself looking at my television last evening to see the likes of Devant Maharaj and to hear the likes of Stephen Cadiz and Nyree Alfonso and our good friend from the PNM, Harry Raghunanan, talking about the procurement of the Galleon's Passage. You will remember, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, that the Prime Minister, hearing all of the public stirring that was taking place out of the Port Authority, sought the services of an independent businessman, Christian Mute, who went down to the port and conducted a fact-finding exercise. And on the basis of those facts, 2 senior managers were suspended and have since been terminated from their arrangements with the Port Authority on the basis of forensic evidence that was garnered, irrefutable forensic evidence. We have been threatened with court actions. We yet await them, other than a very palsy action for wrongful termination in the industrial court. That is the way we do the business. As a result of all of that, and against the basis of the facts that have been hitherto explained to this nation by my friend, Minister Young, and my friend, a moment ago even, Minister Sinanan, we are at the pre-action protocol stage against Nyree Alfonso, and I give the assurance on behalf of the government and the people of Trinidad and Tobago who we represent that very shortly, perhaps within a matter of weeks, legal action will be filed against Nyree Alfonso for breach of her fiduciary duty as a result of her using her knowledge that she gained from being an advisor to the port, participating as agent in a process, and the one who eventually was able to benefit from the issuance of the contract in the purported procurement of the Superfast Galatia, using her knowledge and the opportunity of the tender process made known to her in those capacities as attorney at law for the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for her own personal gain and that of her appointed agent, Intercontinental Shipping Limited. So you have the assurance that just like in the CLICO matter, acting on behalf of the public and in the public interest, legal actions will shortly ensue in this regard. I had to suffer the agony of seeing a good old friend, Harry Raghunanan, a member of the PNM, join with Devant Maharaj yesterday and Nyree Alfonso, each of them speaking as though they were marine experts. None. They might have expertise in other things, but certainly not in the business of maritime shipping and procurement, as their record have seen. We in the PNM are about process. I just want to say, Apasa, that one of Dr. Rowley's great achievements has to be the fact that he is known to Trinidad and Tobago and the region and the world as a man who stands solidly on principle and who lives by the principle that we have enshrined in our party's constitution, morality in public affairs. One of his signal and singular achievements has been that personal philosophy. He has been able to imbue that in every single one of the other 22 of us in the cabinet, such that We live with those principles as well as household concepts. And to this day, 3 years on in government, not one of my colleagues have been justifiably accused of interfering with public funds in circumstances that was rampant under the years of the United National Congress in their 2 terms in government between 1995 and 2001, and again between 2010, 5 years and 3 months later in 2015. Not one of us. And that, I want this nation to understand, is one of Dr. Rowley's singular achievements, standing and looming large, especially following what went for government, led by Kamla Prasad Bisesa in the last 5 years. We stand for process. We stand on those principles. And every member of the PNM understands this. The business of morality in public affairs is written in our party's constitution. Harry Raghunanan, being a member of the PNM, is bound by our constitution and the rules of the PNM. On that basis, the party received information and a complaint from a public-spirited citizen about a most untoward conversation that was, let me emphasize, recorded, electronically recorded between Mr. Raghunanan and a supplier to the PTSC, bus supplier. So the complaints and the issues you heard Mr. Raghunanan raising yesterday had nothing to do with any boat. It had nothing to do with any galleon's passage. His problems with the PNM had to do with buses and the PTSC. But yet, I heard Devant Maharaj introducing him to you yesterday, or whenever they met in that ill-fated press conference, as some marine expert. That's not the business here. His troubles with the PNM came as a result of issues around PTSC and a tendering process. Haiga is a firm that provides buses to PTSC out of China. This conversation was recorded on the 1st of June 2016, and as I said, it had absolutely nothing to do with water, shipping, or any boat. This most revealing and troubling conversation that was recorded raised serious issues for us in the PNM, because after all, Mr. Raghunanan is a senior party member and at the time held office as chairman of the Oropouche West constituency of the PNM. He has access to all of us as members of parliament, and when we are in government, as ministers of government. And the terms of the conversation against that background was very, very troubling to the party indeed. And as such, the matter was raised at the General Council of the PNM some time past. And the General Council, not one man, not Fitzgerald Hines, or the General Secretary, or the political leader, but the General Council of the PNM took a decision that that complaint should be referred in accordance with our party's constitution to the Investigations Committee of the People's National Movement. Having been so referred, the Investigations Committee began its work. They arranged 3 meetings, ladies and gentlemen, and invited Mr. Raghunanan to each of those so that his voice, his position would be heard in keeping with the principles of natural justice. He refused to show up on 2 occasions, and on the 3rd occasion, did not show up but sent a legal representative. Left with little other choice, and having heard his representative, the Investigations Committee continued its work because, as you know, in keeping with the principles of natural justice, while you have a right to be heard, It doesn't mean that you must be heard. It means you must be accorded that right. You must be given an opportunity to be heard. And he was. So the committee continued its work, finalized its report, and the matter moved in accordance with our party's constitution to the Disciplinary Committee of the People's National Movement, which will hold a meeting on Thursday next, and to which Mr. Raghunanan would again be invited. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to indicate to you, for the benefit of all who would have seen Mr. Raghunanan parade yesterday with the likes of Devant Maharaj and Nyree Alfonso, all of them who have their own independent lots and troubles and problems to deal with, that we of the People's National Movement found the content of the recorded conversation to be troubling, sufficiently troubling, to deal with the matter as I have just described to you on the basis of PNM's internal disciplinary processes. And this matter, if it yields information that should gain the attention of other agencies in Trinidad and Tobago, it most certainly will. So we have presented today my friend Mr. Young demonstrating the approaches that we took to improve the sea bridge between Trinidad and Tobago and to procure vessels for our military in a proper and most noble way. Minister Sinanan indicated to you that Nyree Alfonso is no ordinary player. She has issues of her own. And as I indicated to you, legal action will be instituted very shortly against her along the lines as I have just indicated. And as for Mr. Harry Raghunanan, I spoke today to cause the nation to understand. If you think his troubles had anything to do with the galleon's passage, of which he spoke at length, and any comments he would have made about any vessel, it has nothing to do with that. It had to do with a very troubling conversation that was recorded and for which the party acted in terms. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Acting Attorney General Sir Fitzgerald Hines. Just to wrap up on a couple notes, to add to what my two colleagues have said, and in particular what the Acting Attorney General has said about the commencement of action, and to report once again to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, action has been commenced by the government against intercontinental shipping for what they did with relation to the superfast glacier. You all will remember that they literally pulled the rug out from underneath the sea bridge. Action has been commenced against them for that. And you recall Mr. Sinanan saying the role Nyree Alfonso played in how Intercontinental came to bring the superfast glacier to Trinidad and Tobago. That action is currently before the courts and we will pursue it. We have sued for, I believe, $8 to $10 million in damages against intercontinental shipping. The electronic recording that Acting Attorney General Hines spoke to, because we've seen this before, when we talk about forensic work being done and recordings, they immediately starts a conversation with a suggestion that it is the state's apparatus for interception being used. I want to put that to bed before it even starts. I expect those on the other side to want to rush that. This was an individual outside of Trinidad and Tobago recording a conversation that he had with someone sounding astoundingly like Mr. Harry Raghunanan. And the content of that conversation is most troubling, and suggestions of corrupt practices and behaviors with respect to procurement at PTSC was the content of that recorded conversation where someone recorded someone sounding like Mr. Harry Raghunanan engaging in that type of behavior. As AG has said, that is now currently going through the process at the PNM for disciplinary action to be taken. And then it was quite astounding yesterday that Mr. Harry Raghunanan sold himself as why he is facing these problems is because he took on corruption at the port. I remind you all in Trinidad and Tobago, as A.G. Hines has just reminded us, it was the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Rowley, who appointed Mr. Mute to go and do a fact-finding mission. And then he took that to the Parliament, the first and single only time a Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago has appeared before a Joint Select Committee as a witness. And he took and laid that report in the Parliament before that Joint Select Committee and said that he had been told by a whistleblower that there was something amiss in the procurement of the cargo star. As a result of that, we then did a forensic examination at the port, and 2 persons have been terminated as a result of those forensic investigations. So these are the issues that we wanted to bring to your attention today, and unfortunately to respond to the continuation of fake news by those who behave in a most unpatriotic manner. And I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize to the government of Australia for the behavior of this UNC party and Mr. Devant Maharaj. The Australian government is entitled to do whatever investigation they want, because they are actually ones who confirm all that I have said this afternoon. They are the ones who invited the Prime Minister and his team to come to Australia to participate in discussions with Australian companies and are financing the purchase of these vessels, that we currently have these companies competing against each other, and we will get the best deal for Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you all very much. We'll take a few quick questions. What I could tell you on the fast ferry side is INCAT had come in at a certain price in the $60 million range, and that was for a 100-meter fast ferry. The Ostal was in the $70 million range for a 94-meter vessel, and when we told them that we were getting a 100-meter for that price, they immediately were able to counter-propose a price more in line with that. We have not yet entered into active negotiations. So what we have are the proposals. We are now inviting them to Trinidad and Tobago to have discussions with them for the reduction of price. The proposed price for each of the Cape-class vessels is $35 million each. That's $70 million. In total, we intend to try and bring that down. And again, I saw those on the other side suggesting it was $100 million being proposed for these 2 vessels. That's completely untrue. Not at this stage. There's an international investigation, not at this stage. At this stage, all we can say, it is currently under a magnifying glass. Any other questions?
Well, recordings, video recordings, once they meet the standards set out in the rules of the court, are admissible, but for the time being, we are talking about our internal investigation. As I said, if this yields any further investigations, its value will become known later on, because that obviously will not be the only evidence one might have. One might have a recording, and one can have other evidence, but I was speaking purely about it in the context of what we have as a basis for instituting the proceedings we have, for which we have given Mr. Raghunanan an opportunity to be heard, which so far he has only very, very shyly accepted.
Any other questions?
You'd recognize that a vessel coming into Trinidad, owned by the government, will have certain procedures and processes to follow. We have gotten a vessel flag with the Trinidad flag some time ago. We do have some reporting from an inspection from the Lloyd's brokers, which my information is that have been handed in on Friday. So that is another step that have been concluded. As we speak today, the inspectors are supposed to be back on the vessel doing some final inspections, which we expect to be handed in by about Wednesday or Thursday of this week, and then that will be submitted to the Maritime Division. So we are in the process. It is ongoing, and as I said, we will have the vessel in service in the shortest possible time. But the process is ongoing, and so far we have been able to accomplish at least 2 of the steps that has to be completed. If things go as planned, the answer to that is yes. However, these are reports that have to be done by independent institutions, and we have to await. We will not put the vessel in operations until all the procedures have been completed and the authorities are satisfied that the vessel is fit for purpose. So far, things are going as planned.
Okay. No.
Okay. We recognize that the flooding in Port of Spain have been with us for quite a while, and it have been getting worse every year. What the ministry did a couple months ago is that we actually went out on the ground and we looked at different areas, and we recognized we had to do something about it. A survey was done and some designs were done in-house by the Pure Division. A contract was awarded, and my information is that this week it is supposed to start, where we are going to do a pilot project in the South Key area, where we will be putting a sump and a very large pump to pull the water out of South Key, especially in the high tide. If that project is successful, we're going to repeat that in several spots in downtown Port of Spain to actually pull the water out. It will not solve the problem, because the problem in Port of Spain is a much bigger problem. It has to do with the fact that the Port of Spain is basically a basin. The water that is coming down to get into the sea actually travels through the St. Anne's River, the Marval River, and all the excess water has to go into the underground drains in Port of Spain, which have not been upgraded over the past 50, 60 years. So we recognize that we have the infrastructure in Port of Spain has to be addressed, but immediately what the ministry is doing, and 2 contracts actually went out within the last week. One is for a clearing of all the cylinders to take the water across the Rising Road, and also one to improve the drainage channel with a sump and a massive pump as a pilot project. I understand that those 2 projects are starting this week. If it works, we are going to repeat those projects all the way along Rising Road, and we feel we will get a significant amount of relief from that project. No, not necessarily. What we're doing is that we
prevent that flooding.
Yeah, we are increasing the capacity. The problem with flooding is capacity. We have not improved the capacity in our water courses for years. So what we're doing is improving the capacity in the drains, and once the water gets into the drain, it will get into the summer, which the pump is an automatic pump, and it will just start to pump the water even in the high tide. The problem we have is once the tide is high, the water can't flow fast enough into the ocean.
It's simple physics and logic, you know. The water is outflowing, it has to flow out into the sea. When the sea and the tide is high, the water is literally hitting a wall and can't flow out into the sea. The pumps will pull it from this area and pump it out, into the sea and provide a level of assistance?
Again, this is a pilot project, so we are doing it with one pump, one sump at this time. Once we feel that that is giving us some sort of relief, then we will expand it. What we anticipate is that we probably may need about 9 pumps all the way from Ryson Road all the way up to South Key. But again, a survey was done by the IDB about downtown flooding that failed sometime last year at the Ministry of Work. We decided, look, we need to do something. We have about 20 odd engineers here, and I told them, 20 odd engineers, let's go out there, let us get something done. And this is what we came up with, and I'm happy that this week the project is actually have started. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. Flooding has a lot to do with the volume of water, the volume of rain that you get in a short space of time, and capacity. We have had a program where we did a lot of, and it's still ongoing, a lot of river cleaning, and that is an ongoing program. But even with that being done, if you get that volume of rain in a short space of time, it all has to do with capacity. So the ODPM did put out a bulletin that we will get flash flooding, we will get some flooding today. All indication is that most of the water have run out already, and we will be monitoring it as we go forward. But we are in the rainy season, and so far we have been able to manage with the amount of work that went into the program, and we will continue this as we go on into the rainy season. Yes, the ministry does have the resources. Again, the resources to do what? As a country, we have done a lot of development, but our infrastructure have not kept up with that. And what we find happening is that developers, everybody, we keep developing, we're not widening the channels. And this is an exercise that we are looking at going forward. We have to improve the channels for the volume of water that we're getting now. The rain that is falling now is not normal, and you get a lot of rain in a short space of time. The infrastructure just can't handle that.
And just to add to that, I mean, you all would see the same thing we see. This is not a phenomenon that is unique to Trinidad and Tobago. We're seeing this taking place all over the world internationally, and places that were not flooding before are flooding. So it means something is taking place with the global warming, etc. The point is the government is looking at it. There is no quick flick of a switch pump solution, but Minister Sinanan and his engineers are focused on it. All right, yes, I know. I am here today in a governmental capacity. That's a very easy question to answer. Mr. Maharaj has a lot of time on his hands and seems to spend a lot of time writing letters all over the place, in and outside of Trinidad and Tobago, apparently. He has no credibility, so I wouldn't take on anything that Mr. Maharaj writes, including the press releases he likes to write. There is absolutely no racial or religious hatred or inequality in the People's National Movement. Actually, I was thinking here, as you look right now at what you're seeing as being representative of the People's National Government Movement. You may not have seen that before. That yesterday was a bit of fun taking place, and it's interesting to know next year we'll invite Mr. Maharaj to the PNM Sports Day so he could come and participate. All right? Thank you very much.
If he's coming, he could come in a yellow sari.
But the point is, to end on a serious note, you've heard us saying, and we will continue to say it, but not only say it, we live it in the PNM. Every creed and race finds an equal place in the People's National Movement. And may God continue to bless the nation. Thanks you all very much. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thanks.